It's another day in the Emerald City, the immutable fortress, the Ethereum core, where the law of the land is code and the grass is always greener. Today we've got Jake Lane.
Hey.
He's the newest member of SputnikVM ETC Labs core development. He's also working on the Ethereum eWasm. Jake, what's a WASM?
Yeah, let me elaborate on that a bit more, actually. So WebAssembly itself is just an instruction set and a specification for that. There's really three kind of major ways of executing WebAssembly, or any instruction set that is not the CPU for that matter. So the first one is interpreting. It's arguably the safest because there's an interpreter engine that directly executes the WASM byte code, or maybe lowers it to another representation first. But the point is that an interpreter directly executes WebAssembly, and so it manages the memory itself, and it's very high level. The second one is just-in-time compilation, or JIT compilation abbreviated. And JIT compilation leverages the performance of the native CPU, so how fast the native CPU can execute its own instructions, by compiling WebAssembly to native CPU machine code on the fly, so that WebAssembly is compiled directly to the native code, which can be executed by the CPU much faster than an interpreter can. And the last one is ahead of time compilation, which is kind of essentially just compiling it like WebAssembly is taken in, and out comes native code. So interpreting is the slowest of them all, but it's also the safest because it's higher level and it directly executes everything, and it manages its own memory. JIT compilers are much faster, but they do have a couple of security concerns. The first of which being, the fact that with any JIT, you have to flag some area of memory as executable, and if you can use a buffer overflow or some other vulnerability to write to that memory without the JIT, basically writing arbitrary data to that memory, the JIT will do whatever you want it to do. So that's one kind of vulnerability. And the other one has to do with expensive optimizations. So, for example, some optimizations don't necessarily run in linear time, and so the JIT compiler can reach a piece of code that is either maliciously inserted or just incidentally present, which would be very expensive to optimize and essentially slowing down the blockchain a bit. Well, not necessarily the blockchain, but the smart contract execution. And so you could potentially introduce very expensive operations for not much gas, because the gas schedule is not designed with those JIT specific details in mind. And the last one is ahead of time compilation, which is reasonably safe. It's just that you can't expect every client to maintain or cache the compiled WebAssembly to native code, because if you do that for the entire blockchain, obviously you kind of have a lot of storage requirements. Okay,
so you went over three different versions. How? What would we call these three different ones again? You said just in time.
So there's interpreted, the fastest, the slowest, and the safest. Just in time compilation, or JIT compilation, which is fast but has some security concerns, and ahead of time compilation, which kind of behaves like compiling anything to native code.
Okay, just looking at you, you don't seem like a big fan of the ahead of time.
No, it's just a very simple concept. I'm not necessarily extremely enthusiastic about any of these things, because to me they're just ways of executing WASM. It's not like we're all going to make a bunch of money by writing.
Yeah, there's nothing magical about it. It's just another way to do it.
Yeah, and so ahead of time is just the simplest one. It just has some storage requirements.
So, in all the areas to focus, what attracted you to the low level ecosystem development of, the interpreter and compilation?
I don't know. I guess I've always kind of been on the lower level of things. I mean, before I started working on blockchain and WebAssembly, I was focused a lot on embedded stuff and operating systems, mostly as a hobby. And so I kind of just went into the blockchain space with most of my experience being in the lower level rather than with full stack or like front end or other higher level areas.
And was
So
Ethereum your first blockchain project?
yeah. I just one day kind of started contributing on a GitHub repo, and it kind of went from there.
Well, give me. I'd love to, understand that journey a bit more. What was the first thing you added to GitHub? Who was the first person to reach out? When did you get that validation that I'm contributing to something bigger?
Let me think about that for a second, actually. So yeah, no, the first PR I opened contributing to Ethereum was a PR on Hira, the C++ implementation of an eWasm virtual machine. And so that PR was kind of a messy PR, but it essentially updated Hira for the newer version of EVMC. And so Hira at the time was kind of a dead project, or not really dead, but there was not really anyone working on it at the moment.
Okay.
But I kind of, I decided to open a PR to update Hira for EVMC. Going back, it was probably a little bit of a broken PR, but it got fixed up and it turned out.
How old were you when you did the PR?
What's the question?
How old were you when you did the PR?
15.
15. Okay. And who was the first person to respond to you that kind of like made you feel like, okay, I'm contributing something?
I guess the first person to review the PR was the eWasm team lead. So that's Axic or on GitHub or Alex Bergzasi.
Okay, and then what was the step after that, going from submitting to the PR to actually officially being part of the EF team, the eWasm?
That was kind of like there wasn't really a formal process. I just like met with a lot of the people interested in eWasm at the time at DevCon 3, and we kind of decided to start working together more on that. And yeah, over the next couple months, we kind of just became a team.
Wow, and you're still actively working on eWasm.
Yeah, more or less.
And what do you think is next as far as a milestone there?
It's kind of hard to say about the like, I guess the next milestone, because there's like kind of two sets of roadmaps. We have ETH1X, and there's a lot of people working on that on the eWasm team who are really interested. And frankly, I'm actually not super focused on that. I'm more interested in ETH 2.0 research for eWasm. And as of recently, I guess they're kind of becoming a bit more intertwined, especially since we're exploring different storage models and stuff. But I guess for me personally, in working on ETH 2.0 eWasm, would be to kind of figure out how feasible or beneficial adopting microWasm would be.
MicroWasm.
And it's not really a major roadmap milestone. It's just something I'm kind of interested in right now and think that could benefit the eWasm initiative for ETH 2.0.
Okay. Now, I kind of want to shift gears to the work you're also doing with ETC. Now, I know that your role is important in that, you know, Terry also personally recruited you, Terry Culver, our CEO. I know that you've got a very unique insight uh, into blockchain development because you're working on two different chains. Um, do you think that the work you're doing on the one side, you know, benefits the work you're doing on the other?
Yeah, I actually think that as long as EVM continues to exist in general, my work on ETC benefits pretty much any EVM-based blockchain ecosystem because it's really just a generic EVM. Yes, there's a couple options that are ETC specific for certain hard fork configurations, but it's just at the core, it's an EVM implementation written in Rust, which has bindings that can be used to integrate with another client. And yeah, same thing in my work for the Ethereum Foundation. For example, I'm working on the EVMC API, which is a standardized portable API between the client and the VM. And so those two projects are kind of tools that I think benefit the ecosystem more, just way beyond either Ethereum or ETC or some other EVM-based chain. I think they're very fundamental kind of base layer things that don't really, they're agnostic to what chain you're running them on, barring a few hard fork features that can be switched on and off.
So even outside of Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, this work could be kind of transferred to other chains?
I'm personally not super aware of non-Ethereum or ETC chains using EVM outside of like the enterprise stuff like Quorum and whatever else they're doing over there. I'm not super aware of other EVM-based chains, but yes, any chain that runs EVM, SputnikVM.
Okay. And how do you see the kind of two projects working together? Do you think it's zero sum? Do you think you know, one reinforces the other, that they go in two different directions?
I really don't think it's zero sum at all. I mean, judging by the fact that me working on either project kind of indirectly improves both projects, both in terms of, you know, like relations between the groups and also because Sputnik VM is applicable to pretty much any EVM-based chain. It's definitely not zero sum. I think that I actually have not done a lot of thinking on what the kind of roles in the ecosystem are respectively of Ethereum and ETC. Personally, to me, they're two chains, and they both have opportunity to explore a lot of research concepts that could improve the blockchain space as a whole.
Yeah, and at the absolute minimum, that's what we get, right? We get more research and development because the DNA is similar, but the philosophies and structure around those platforms are different. On the compiling interpreting side, do you think there's going to be a difference between Ethereum Classic and Ethereum a year from now?
In terms of execution engine or what, like?
Yeah.
Yes and no. So I think that Ethereum in the coming months intends to adopt either some set of eWasm for ETH1X or EIP 615, also known as EVM 1.5, which introduces what is known as static jumps for the EVM.
Whoa, static jumps for the EVM.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a really cool term.
Yeah. What it boils down to, though, for the blockchain ecosystem using EVM is that there's a lot more capability to statically analyze EVM binaries, because instead of having like computed jumps where the control flow is always kind of decided at runtime. You have static jumps, which are by nature static. And so, yeah, what it boils down to is better static analysis. And yeah, I think that's the main way that Ethereum might differ from ETC. But I also have discussed EIP 615 with the compiler team at ETC Labs, and they actually seem to be pretty interested because they've also been a little bit what's the term? Annoyed with the warts in the EVM design, and I think that EVM 1.5 would be kind of a nice little improvement to make it more bearable.
Okay, and now would that change be unique to the ETC version of the EVM, or?
Well, I'm pretty sure, unless we somehow pull it together faster, that that Ethereum will probably adopt the IP 615 first. But I also think that there's no reason why we also can't learn from that and potentially introduce EIP 615 or some variant of it as well.
Interesting. So it seems that even though there are two different development teams and different communities, a lot of the roadmaps are parallel. You know, staying close together in implementation so you can learn from the other.
Yeah, I think that ETC does kind of take what's the term? ETC does have the opportunity and to kind of see what kind of happens like when you merge in these EIPs and see how it affects the blockchain, and then they can kind of build on that or decide not to adopt a certain EIP. And I think that's a pretty valuable opportunity, and I think that we could do kind of something similar with EIP 615. I'm not sure if the kind of development streams are parallel in the sense that if I'm not sure how much ETC Labs intends to do ETH1X style things like EIP 615. I guess that's up to people developing the clients and the ECIPs group, which frankly I'm not super involved in, just as I'm not super involved in the EIP discussion.
Yeah, how would you find the time, man? I feel like you just don't have enough hobbies in your day, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I personally have never been super interested in like scrolling down like 200 common GitHub threads to like get my.
That's a unique. That requires a unique skill set.
Yeah.
But I feel like you've filled up your days well enough. You don't need to also go through all of that.
Yeah, more or less.
So on what we can learn between the two ecosystems, because you know you kind of embody this interoperability between the chains, right? You're someone who works on both. What can ETC do from here that would be kind of like, you know, emulating a learning lesson from Ethereum?
Well, there's a lot of proposals right now to improve Ethereum in the ETH1X initiative regarding things like the stateless model or just a completely different contract storage model other than the key value pair stuff we have today. We have the EVM 1.5 stuff and things like that. And so one option is obviously wait to see how it looks in production, what the kind of cost benefit of that is after the fact. And that's one way to kind of learn retroactively if there are mistakes made in introducing that design to Ethereum. And another option is actually maybe prototyping it even earlier. and kind of doing like a more aggressive testnet approach, where you have like a lot of kind of heavy R&D, but just like more implementation oriented, where you're messing with these kind of things and building on it really fast and seeing if you, and then you can kind of build a culture of mutual contribution, where a lot of like ideas and stuff in Ethereum and ETC are implemented really fast, and you can have a community built around kind of like really, really aggressive trying out like different design changes on test nets, I guess.
Yeah, I like the overall aggressive ethos, you know, and figuring out how to take advantage of being a nimble, you know, the size of ETC being different than Ethereum gives us the ability to be aggressive, just like you said. And I think it's going to be interesting over the next few months to see how, as a community, we build that kind of infrastructure to get this culture of contribution. On the Ethereum ETC kind of learning, what other area would you work in outside of compiling? Are you interested in the cryptography, you know, ZK snarks? Are you looking at scalability, consensus models? What's the next interest area for you?
Yeah, actually the next interest area for me is probably the cryptography stuff. It's kind of a breath of fresh air from the low level stuff. It goes super high level. You describe everything in terms of algebraic structures and all that, rather than like machine registers and stuff. Yeah, no, I'm always kind of been really interested in zero knowledge protocols and what you can do with those.
Yeah, and I know that the changes we're having in the Atlantis hard fork are going to allow Ethereum Classic to also start incorporating ZK snarks. This was part of the change that Ethereum's done already, right? Part of Byzantium, I believe.
If you're referring to the pre-compiles for snarks, yeah, I think so. The EC mul and EC add for BN128, I think, were added in Byzantium.
Yes. So, you know, that becomes an exciting time. Is there another chain that you think has interesting properties? Not necessarily, you know, you believe in the entire pitch, but, you know, is there somewhere else you look for inspiration?
Well, I'm really interested to see how the ecosystem develops around interop chains like Cosmos and Polkadot. I'm not necessarily taking sides, because I know that's been it's been a hot topic in the past couple of weeks on Twitter. But I'm definitely interested to see how that develops with interop chains, and how we can kind of see those working together with conventional blockchains like Ethereum.
You know, I think that that's the hot topic. Definitely Twitter's exploded with a lot of, I don't know, hostility is the word I want to use.
Oh yeah, no, it's fun. I've been shit posting all weekend just to it adds a little bit of comic relief.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team, right? It's not like, don't get too into it. But kind of wrapping up things, if people wanted to see some of your shit posting or ask you questions, what's the best place to reach out to you to learn more about the work you're doing?
I guess my Twitter is probably the best place. Like, DMs are open, whatever. Just send me a DM or something if you have any questions, or if you just want to look at me shit posting. It also works. You can see my feed. But yeah, you can send me a question DMs, or if you find my email somehow, probably on my GitHub, you can write it there. Although I'm notoriously terrible at looking at my emails, so.
Okay, we'll share Jake's Twitter link. We'll also share the Discord, where you can find the rest of the ETC Labs dev team. Jake, thank you so much for the time today. Looking forward to not only working together, but seeing some of the amazing things you're working on. It's definitely an honor to be working with someone so accomplished at such a young age. So yeah, keep kicking ass. And everybody in ETC land, see you guys next week. Take care.
All right, later, man.